Camera stands are jiggling a little bit. As Tom Stafford and Gene Cernan ride over to pad 19 from the suit-up van over on pad 16, they go past a big area about the size of 3 football fields where they would land if they had to eject from the spacecraft while it's still on the pad. 3 armored personnel carriers run around that field like hot rod tanks ready just in case. And out at sea, in an area roughly 15 miles wide and 47 miles to the east, a small flotilla of boats, Navy, Marine Corps boats, even Air Force boats, waits for that same purpose, while rescue helicopters hover overhead. Of course, we hope it won't ever be necessary, but there are ships and planes and armored personnel carriers ready just in case. And this morning, there's an extra Navy ship in that area, the newly commissioned nuclear submarine James K. Polk, which has just put out to sea to launch her first practice missile. Her skipper, Commander Bob Douglas, plans to stay up on the surface until after the launch, so he can watch the bird fly over. Well, of course, this is Tom Stafford's 6th trip over here, as has been duly mentioned many times. He's been in space once. He and Gene Cernan have been over here 3 times on this Gemini 9 mission. What perhaps has been forgotten is that this is the 13th manned space flight. 6 in the Mercury program, 6 in the Gemini program until now. But lest that number 13 concern you, remember that there's another well-known saying, 3rd time's a charm. And this is the 3rd time that Tom and Gene Cernan will be going up the elevator here on the gantry at pad 19. The transfer van arrives. Deke Slayton, of course, the first out. And then Tom Stafford. And behind him, Gene Cernan, as they give the thumbs up, the smiles, the happy sides. Let's give them a shake of the hand this time. Give them our own handshake for luck. There's a notice in the elevator that says, Tom and Gene, notice the down capability for this elevator has been removed. Make this a good one. Your spacecraft crew. And up it goes, that 30-second ride up to the 100-foot level in the White Room, where they'll be greeted by another sign hanging over the spacecraft, a poem written by Jim Lovell and Buzz Aldrin, the backup crew. The poem says, "We were kidding before, but not anymore. Get yourselves into space or we'll take your place." Jim Lovell has been, we understand, kidding quite a little bit with Tom and Gene Cernan about this, suggesting to Gene that he, Jim, and Gene gang up and switch places, kick Tom out. But Tom Stafford wants to go on this mission. He wants desperately to get up there and perform more than just a simple rendezvous and docking, wants to perform some extra maneuvers, wants to make sure it's a good mission all the way. And I'm sure that this time, today, he's just as eager as would be any good test pilot that this be an on-time launch and that rendezvous and docking be achieved on the 3rd revolution with the augmented target docking adapter. So there they are. They're in the spacecraft. They're getting into the spacecraft now and ready to go about 2 hours from now. This is Steve Owen at pad 19.
We'll take it down with us. Look at it, yeah. All right, go in. Okay, yes. Okay, thank you. Don't have enough places to live. We'll keep it easy and cool, I guess. 118, yeah. I guess your tried that on the map, but we didn't need time. Yeah. It was good. What was changed? Top connections. No, we checked it again. They took it off with the test lens on and check on it and checked out. We got it on. Okay. Hey, Jim, you wanted that? Okay. Where's Bridget?
is Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 104 minutes and counting, 104 and counting, all still proceeding very well on this countdown, which has now been in progress about 4.5 hours. The hatches on the Gemini spacecraft were just closed a matter of a minute or so ago. Tom Stafford, the command pilot's hatch was first closed at the 105 mark, and about 10 seconds later, the pilot, Eugene Cernan, had his hatch closed. All is still proceeding very well at this point. When the astronauts came into the White Room, they brought a prop along with them. It was about 2 feet long, and it was in the shape of a match. The crew requested that this match be brought back down from the White Room and presented to Martin Company test conductor Frank Carey, signifying that they want to have the match help Frank get the launch vehicle off for them today. T-minus 103 minutes and 5 seconds and counting. We now switch you to the Mission Control Center in Houston.
And this is Gemini Control in Houston. At our control center, the white team of flight controllers have reported for duty and are manning the consoles at this moment. Our target vehicle is nearing the end of its 28th revolution and is now passing over the Central Pacific. Its apogee is 161.9 nautical miles by 161.5 nautical miles. Our flight controllers are now standing by and will pick up, that is, the white team will pick up the control of this mission. Also on hand here at Mission Control is Chris Kraft, our Director of Flight Operations, who has just come into the room. This is Gemini Control at 102 minutes, 14 seconds before the launch.
Gemini Launch Control, coming up on T-minus 64 minutes and counting. T-minus 64, everything's still going very well with our countdown. The augmented target docking adapter, now in the early phases of its 29th revolution. In the spacecraft at Launch Complex 19, astronauts Tom Stafford and Eugene Cernan have completed their switch list check. This is a check of all switches in the cockpit to ensure that they are in the proper position for launch. Stafford also has just completed a series of ultra-high frequency communications checks from the spacecraft. We'll be coming up in a matter of a minute or so on a status check for erector lowering. This will be followed in about 7 or 8 minutes by bringing down that 138-foot erector at Launch Complex 19. All still proceeding very satisfactorily as the countdown has all morning. T-minus 63 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. This is Gemini Launch Control. This is Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 57 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. The 138-foot erector is now coming down at Launch Complex 19. When they first saw the sky as the erector moved back, Eugene Cernan exclaimed, "Oh boy," and Tom Stafford, looking up, declared that it was a great day. Run by a 150 horsepower motor in a winch system, which first eases the erector back from the spacecraft launch vehicle combination and then acts as a brake as it eases the erector down to its down position at the pad. The operation should take about 10 minutes if all goes well. In the meantime, the remainder of the aspects of the count going on at this time are all going well. T-minus 56 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. This is Gemini Launch Control.
The Week in Space. CBS News selective color coverage of the mission of Gemini 9. This morning, the second attempt this week to launch astronauts Stafford and Cernan for the start of their 3 days in space. Reporting from Cape Kennedy, CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good morning, and it is a good morning down here at Cape Kennedy. The skies are virtually clear, certainly far better than they were on Wednesday when they tried to get Gemini 9 up for the second time. The weather downrange, some 1,300 miles out in the Atlantic, where the astronauts would have to land if anything went wrong during the launch phase of the operation today. The weather down there is good too. The aircraft carrier Wasp, which is standing by, reports to us. The astronauts have been in the capsule for over an hour now, waiting for blast off, and everything is proceeding on schedule. The voice we hear from Mission Control here at Cape Kennedy is that of Jack King, and he should have an announcement now.
This is Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 34 minutes and counting. T-minus 34, all still going excellently at Launch Complex 19 in our Gemini 9 countdown, as the ATDA target continues to swing around on its 29th revolution. At this point in the countdown, we're going through a series of flight control checks with the Gemini launch vehicle and overall telemetry checks between the launch vehicle and the Air Force Eastern Test Range tracking elements. During this phase of the count also, the automatic sequencer, the so-called Master Operations Control System, has come into effect on the Gemini countdown. This is a sequencer that controls and commands many of the actions that will occur during over the final phases of the count. It will command some 10 activities and monitor some 25 other functions till we get to the T-minus 5 minute mark, and then we have a completely automatic operation from T-minus 5 down through ignition and liftoff. All systems and all checkouts still going very well at the pad at the present time at T-minus 32 minutes and 50 seconds and counting. This is Gemini Launch Control.
So that you will not be confused as this countdown goes on this morning, let's explain something right now. The countdown clock, you see, is a countdown to an 8:39 minute and 33-second launch. That is 39 minutes after 9 Eastern Daylight Time. But there is a 4-minute and 29-second hold built into that count. In other words, the count, as you see it occasionally supered on your screen there, goes down to T minus 3 minutes and then stops counting for 4 minutes and 29 seconds and then picks up again for a launch at 9:39 Eastern Daylight Time. That built-in hold is to permit last-minute adjustments in the flight path of the Titan rocket and Gemini spacecraft it will carry aloft to meet on the third orbit with the augmented target docking adapter. That ship that went up on Wednesday and unmanned waits out in space. This, as you know, is a 3-day flight to include some 9 rendezvous and dockings, it is hoped, if all is going well with the spacecraft. And tomorrow morning, the most dramatic part of the flight, the highlight, dramatically at any rate, a 2.5-hour space walk by 32-year-old astronaut Eugene Cernan. We said that augmented target docking adapter, which has taken the place of the Gina, which was not put into orbit on May 17th through the failure of its Atlas booster, that ATDA is now on its 29th revolution and will be back over the Cape here at 8:39. She's been patiently orbiting the Earth for 2 days now, right on exactly on a perfect circular orbit, just where she's supposed to be for the rendezvous with these 2 astronauts. But the question is she the same girl they expected to meet out there in space? Perhaps she's not. The problem is in this shroud, which encompassed the target adapter as it took off from the Cape here on Wednesday morning, a shroud which was to protect it in the launch phase of the operation and then was supposed to drop off as the target adapter got into orbit. The question is, did that shroud drop off? If it did not, it would mean that it would be difficult, be impossible, in fact, to dock with the target. The rendezvous can still take place, the spacewalk can still take place, but the docking practice, which was supposed to be conducted by Stafford and Cernan, would have to be passed over. And that would be another blow to our space program, inasmuch as the first several series of docking practices were supposed to have taken place by Armstrong and Scott during the Gemini 8 flight. When they had to come back through that stuck thruster problem early, they didn't get but 1 docking practice. And if there were none on this Gemini 9 flight, it means we'll be really 2 flights behind in this docking practice. However, on the other hand, the Chris Kraft, the flight director in Houston, has said that he does not consider that a vital part of this function, since Armstrong and Scott proved that docking is just exactly what they expected it to be, and we can now do our docking practice in the trainer. They would like to get it in space. Dave Shoemaker, out at McDonnell Aircraft in St. Louis, can tell us more about that shroud and the ATDA with the use of some models we've got out there. Dave?
Well, Walter, this is the way we think the ATDA does not look this morning. That is with the shroud in place, this bullet-shaped cover. But in any event, let's take it in order. Bob Sharp, of course, is with me, and Bob is the man who can really talk about it. Bob, as I say, let's take things in order. What is the shroud? What's it supposed to do? And what's supposed to happen to it?
Well, the shroud, just like it looks there, is a streamline device to cut down the drag and the air resistance during the launch of the ATDA. So then once the vehicle gets out of the atmosphere, the shroud is blown off in 2 sections. And this is accomplished by a timing sequence which occurs during liftoff. It's like turning your oven on and off with an automatic timer.
All right, well, let's assume we've reached that point in the launch. They offered to put some explosive charges in here, Walter, but we passed that. There it comes. Actually, it separates in 2 sections this way and then blows away. What if when Cernan and Stafford get up there, Bob, they find that it's still fully in place? What'll they do?
Well, they'll probably leave it alone then, leave it alone during the extravehicular portion of the mission, and of course they won't be able to dock because the cone is not exposed.
Would it be dangerous, say, to get around there, and is the explosive charge big enough? Could somebody get hurt with it?
I'm not really that familiar with the explosive charge in there or the shape of it. I would say that probably they would stay away from it. I don't know what the impact of it is. If it is substantial, it could be dangerous.
Well, now, what if the shroud should be in a position like this, that is cocked? Pretty obvious that the charges have gone off and that somehow or other it's hung up.
Then I'd say it shouldn't be any problem at all. You could go out there and knock it away probably with the nose of the spacecraft or with an EVA astronaut, either one.
You just go up and bang away at it.
Just give it a slight kick with the nose. Of course, the nose of the spacecraft is strong enough to withstand docking, and it wouldn't be any trouble to go up there and just give it a little kick.
What we used to call Brogan maintenance in the airplane.
Something like that.
Bob Sharp?
Yes.
This is Walter Cronkite. Yesterday at the yesterday evening's briefing, they suggested that they didn't think they'd want to fiddle with that shroud if it seemed to be hanging there, hung up on a cable or something of the kind. Apparently, they just they don't think the docking is so important that they'd want to play with it. Of course, as we know, this operation today, if that shroud is on there at all, is going to be very much of a so-called real-time situation, which I kind of suspect these fellows like. In other words, it's not going to be strictly by the book, but they're going to make up their mind when they get there.
Well, I think that's one more sign of how pilots are really flying this mission. I think really it will be up to Stafford and Cernan when they look at it to decide whether they think they can risk it or not.
I think so. They'll be in the best position of anybody in the world to make a judgment on that. And so that's the real value of having a man in the spacecraft, to not to program things. If you can program things, like we did in Surveyor there, which is a beautiful job, but when it comes to the unexplained or the unknown items there to ascertain what's going on, a pilot or a crew in that spacecraft really pays off.
There's one interesting fact, too. You know, Cernan will be carrying, so to speak, in his hip pocket a pair of wire cutters. They're there for the purpose of cutting loose those straps, which they observed on Gemini 6's and 7s that trail behind the adapter, the back end of the spacecraft in orbit. He's going to cut those away, or try to, with the wire cutters as part of his EVA exercise, his extravehicular activity. There's some suggestion around the Cape here, not official by any means, but just a little speculation that he might just take those wire cutters and cut away that shroud. There is one thing other, though, if I may mention it, gentlemen. Though that thing is spring-loaded, as well as pyrotechnically loaded. That is, there are explosive bolts, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but there are explosive bolts that blow away a ring that holds that shroud on there. That is a signal they did not get at Houston that makes them worry about the shroud being there. They did not get the signal that the explosive bolts had blown. However, and that would be a worry if an astronaut were going too close to that thing, that those bolts might blow, except that they do have the capability of cutting off the battery power to those squibs to keep them from blowing. But there are also these spring-loaded devices which push the shroud away, and they say that those push it away at a speed of about 2.5 or 3 miles an hour. And they are concerned that if we had an astronaut floating around there and the spring loading suddenly went and the thing pushed away at that speed, it could cause some difficulty.
Walter, Bob is pretty sure that this sequence has worked as scheduled. What are your reasons for that, Bob?
Well, I believe at the time the shroud was supposed to jettison the other day right after liftoff, they had two indications there. One was a temperature rise on another telemetry channel.
A temperature rise where in here?
Down in the cone area there, yes, which would indicate that the sun was probably shining on that area and was absorbing some heat. The other at that time is that when the shroud goes off, of course, if it goes off a little bit unevenly, you'll get a kick on the nose and change the rate. So the rate of tumbling of the vehicle was also observed on another channel.
Walter?
Right. Well, now let's review what happens here this morning. Astronauts Stafford and Cernan, in their third attempt to get aloft with Gemini 9, are scheduled to go now in about 23 minutes from now in the launch of Gemini 9. They'll go up, and on the third orbit this afternoon, they hope to rendezvous with an unmanned target that has been circling since Wednesday's launch here and will be passing overhead starting its 30th revolution at the time they lift off. By the third revolution, after a 70,000-mile chase 3 times around the Earth, they expect to be able to meet up with that target, and perhaps, if it does not have the shroud on it, if it's in the configuration and the attitude they expect to dock with it at that time. That would be around 2:05 Eastern Daylight Time this afternoon. If the shroud is not there, they will carry out their normal program, which will include one more docking today, and then tomorrow morning the spacewalk with another docking maneuver to follow that, and recovery landing in the Pacific on Monday morning. CBS News color coverage of the launch of Gemini 9 will continue in a moment.
As America's Gemini heroes whirl through space, they take along equipment specially designed for the Gemini space trips. Among the gear selected was this special toothbrush made by the makers of Picopay toothbrushes. This unique brush is just like the Picopay brush you'd use at home, except it's made with a specially resistant material to stand up to the high temperatures and oxygen levels of space. Just as this special Picopay brush goes along on Gemini flights, so this regular Picopay has become the toothbrush more dentists recommend. You see, Picopay was professionally designed to do the best possible job of cleaning your teeth. Every feature was designed to fight cavities. Handle, head, even the tufts are tapered deeper to clean deeper, where cavities often start. So remember, for the best possible job of cleaning your teeth, get Picopay, the toothbrush recommended by more dentists.
This is the scene earlier this morning, just about an hour and a half ago, when Stafford and Cernan, for the third time, went aloft in that elevator to try to get off on Gemini 9. That's Deke Slayton without the helmet on, without the hat, who you saw carrying a baton-like device. That turned out to be a long replica, supposedly, of a matchstick given to the launch director, allegedly to help light the rocket for takeoff. That is Cernan in the darker helmet visor there, that dark visor to protect his eyes during his spacewalk scheduled for tomorrow morning. Insertion into the spacecraft came just a little over an hour ago, as you see it replayed here on tape. Perhaps you got a quick look at the darker pants that Cernan seemed to be wearing. That is the metallic pants, the iron pants that he will wear to protect his legs against the thrust rockets of his astronaut maneuvering unit, the unit with which he will propel himself through space in that 2.5-hour spacewalk. That due tomorrow morning. About 45 minutes ago, a little less than that, they retracted the erector around the spacecraft at 109 feet of Titan rocket and Gemini spacecraft, and as it came back, Stafford said it was a beautiful sight in the Cape. Cernan said, oh boy. Nelson Benton is down at the Mission Control Center, the Manned Space Center in Houston. He can tell us something about the decisions that will have to be made on a so-called real-time basis, that is a spontaneous basis on this flight. Nelson?
Walter, that shroud you've been discussing is one of the things that has prompted the so-called real-time thinking. Chris Kraft told us yesterday that with the mission of Gemini 9, there'll probably be more of this real-time planning, in other words, choosing alternatives, than there's been on any previous space flight. This they had expected as a result of Rendezvous. Rendezvous is still a partly undetermined thing, but the delays and the problems that have been encountered in Gemini 9 have sort of compounded this. In other words, Walter, there are more questions. However, I suppose space exploration is a matter of questions and a matter of answers. Walter?
Nelson, as you know from what you've heard down there, they plan their first alternate plan in case that shroud is on there when they get up. That knocks out the docking maneuvers. All of the rendezvous maneuvers in the spacewalk can still take place, and they will, in that case, do all of the rendezvous, the three major rendezvous maneuvers. First of all, the rendezvous from the Earth, that is the third revolution rendezvous from here, from the launch. Then a rendezvous, sort of an eyeball rendezvous without the use of radar, just the onboard computers and line of sight and use of the sextant, real space navigation, attempt to find the spacecraft again, the unmanned spacecraft. And then the third rendezvous, a rendezvous from above, so-called, simulating the recovery of a LEM, a lunar excursion module, a landing ship for the moon, back to the mothership in case the landing vehicle couldn't make it to the moon and was stranded somewhere between the moon and the spaceship. This would simulate the recovery of that LEM by the spaceship. All of that would take place, well, the first two would take place today. The walk would then take, the third rendezvous attempt, that rendezvous from above, would take place tomorrow morning, followed by the spacewalk tomorrow morning. Dallas Townsend in New York is following what's going on in the tracking network around the world, and he can give us a rundown on the weather around the world in just 1 minute.
Mazola makes good eating, good sex.
New Mazola is the best tasting margarine ever made, and you can prove it. Look, at normal frying temperatures, new Mazola margarine melts clean, doesn't burn, it stays delicious, looks delicious. That's why it tastes more delicious any way you use it. No burn Mazola's clean taste makes good eating for your whole family.
Mazola makes good eating, good sense.
The major ingredient in Mazola margarine is pure liquid Mazola corn oil, high in good sense polyunsaturates. Because of this, no margarine is nutritionally superior to Mazola in substituting polyunsaturates for saturated fats. So, in place of the more saturated spreads, use no-burn Mazola on toast, on vegetables, even as a sauce for lobster. Mazola's corn oil polyunsaturates make good sense for your whole family.
Mazola makes good eating, good sense.
This is Dallas Townsend of the CBS News Space Center in New York. One of the methods by which we'll be keeping you posted on the progress of Gemini 9 is our Kohlsman Map here in our New York studio. And we'd like to tell you just a bit about what you'll be seeing on it. First, this flashing symbol of the ATDA, the Augmented Target Docking Adapter, already in orbit now for 2 days. The line shows the track of the ATDA, the track of where it's been. We'll also have symbols of the spacecraft and its track once GT9 is in orbit. The circles indicate tracking stations, just for example those at Carnarvon in Western Australia and Hawaii in mid-Pacific. Incidentally, ATDA passed over Carnarvon just a few minutes ago on its 29th pass. There and elsewhere all around the world at this hour, thousands of people of many different nationalities are standing by, waiting to play their own very important parts in the success of the GT9 mission. These are the people who man the worldwide network of tracking stations, miniature control centers strung out around the face of the globe like a necklace, all in touch with mission control in Houston and enabling Houston to keep in touch with astronauts Tom Stafford and Eugene Cernan throughout the 3-day mission. One of those you'll probably be hearing a lot about is Carnarvon in Australia. It will be talking with the astronauts and exchanging vital information as the spacecraft indicates and executes some of those difficult maneuvers on its way to rendezvous. Another is the tracking station in Hawaii. At that critical moment, it will give the astronauts the order to go for their first docking attempt. And of course, there are many others. Weathermen around the world are keeping careful watch. Right now, the reports from all the main recovery areas are good, with excellent visibility. In the main recovery area in the western Atlantic, a report from the carrier Wasp says the weather out there is just beautiful, with a calm sea and just a very slight wind. A very quick look now at how today's rendezvous mission will look on our Kohlsman orbital map. As the target vehicle passes over the United States, some 185 miles up over Cape Kennedy, Gemini 9 will be launched in pursuit. There you'll see the two of them, the two astronauts in Gemini 9, beginning about 700 miles behind and far below, but gradually moving up and closing in. This is, of course, a very much speeded-up version of the chase throughout space that will actually take 4 hours and will involve a series of complicated maneuvers by the Gemini spacecraft. The two vehicles will finally meet at their appointed rendezvous over the Indian Ocean. And then they will fly formation for a while, just a few feet apart, before Gemini starts the first docking maneuver high above Hawaii. That rendezvous, just a few hours from now, will be the fastest rendezvous in space history, one whole revolution of the Earth faster than occurred in Gemini 8. Now back to Walter Cronkite at Cape Kennedy.
Here at the Cape, but plus everything is going swimmingly, I'd say. The weather is really extraordinarily good compared to last Wednesday. There are just a very few scattered clouds and a very high, but very light haze. We ought to get a very good view, as will the tracking cameras themselves, of the launch phase of the Titan this morning. With the countdown now at 11 minutes and 45 seconds, with that 4-minute built-in hold, so it's about 15 minutes to the actual launch time. The families of this 35-year-old balding Lieutenant Colonel Tom Stafford are in Houston. That is his wife and their 2 young girls, and so is the family of Eugene Cernan, his wife, and their 1 quite young daughter. Cernan, at 32, is the youngest of our astronauts yet to go into space. We're all assuming, of course, he is going this morning. They're holding the word and the thought here at Cape Kennedy that this is going to be the day Gemini 9 gets off. This is an historic day in our space program. It was just a year ago that Ed White made his walk in space, and Herb Kaplow has a talk with Ed White in Houston.
Work that Jim McDivitt and I did during the next 20 minutes. I think this one is going to dwarf the work, though, that we did a year ago today when they go out there and spend up to almost 3 hours out in space.
How does it actually feel when you're out there? Is it a sensation of floating or what?
Well, it took me about 100 pages to describe it in the debriefing, so I think it'd be very difficult in just a few minutes to describe it to you now. It's something that's hard for somebody to grasp, to step out and not feel any different going 17,000 miles an hour. But it's the lack of the gravity out there, and it's just like swimming in a great big tank of water. That's probably the closest analogy I can give you.
What sort of work have you been doing with Cernan and other pilots who have or have had EVA mission scheduled for them?
Well, it's been quite a bit of time since I have flown, and after I flew, we had these flights scheduled. We worked and talked together, and I tried to convey to them all the things that I had learned and any difficulties that I had, and I think they've taken these briefings that we talked over and have pretty well gone through the problems that we had on my flight and cleaned them all up.
Are there any major problems involved in the EVA?
No, I don't see any major problems at all. There are little things that a bulky hatch that's been cleared up and such things as that.
But it can be done.
It sure can.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Herb.
We'll let you get up.
They've changed that bulky hatch by putting in a pawl arrangement whereby they can get some leverage on the hatch cover to close it. You remember they were a little concerned after they brought the umbilical back in from Ed White's flight that they could, whether they're going to get it closed or not. And they probably couldn't have re-entered, gotten back safely if they could not have gotten that hatch closed. But that's been taken care of now. This walk is going to be quite a bit different from Ed White's walk. This will be the first time that anybody has walked in space. There have been only 2 before. Leonov, the Russian, was the first one. He was out only a few minutes, about less than 10, and White was out considerably longer than that. But this will be the first time that extravehicular activity has taken place without an umbilical go, just a safety strap, really. The man really will be independent out there in space. Downrange, we can see from our live television cameras the aircraft carrier Wasp. Its radar antenna circling above the craft there. Quick picture we did lose, but an excellent picture, and we're looking forward to again having live television of the recovery of these astronauts on next Monday morning. Speaking again of that, the differences in this spacewalk from the previous ones, when Cernan dons his astronaut, his first tentative steps in space, puts that on and floats out, he will be in every sense free of the spacecraft entirely, except for a 125-foot nylon line, which is a safety feature. In case anything goes wrong, Stafford could reel him back in on that line, of course, and he couldn't go floating out into space. But otherwise, that AMU, Astronaut Maneuvering Unit, is self-contained. It's got its own oxygen supply, its power supply, its maneuvering unit, and its communications back with the spacecraft. That ought to be really a historic first in space when that walk takes place tomorrow morning. With the count at 6 minutes and 40 seconds, with an extra 4 minutes of hold built in there, CBS News color coverage of Gemini 9 will continue in a moment.
Thanks, Mrs. Adams.
You're welcome, Johnny.
It sounds funny, but is there a book that tells how to get children to brush their teeth regularly? We changed to a toothpaste that's meant to reduce cavities, and
But I think it tastes terrible, Mommy, and I still get cavities.
I have the same problem with my family. Have you tried anti-cavity Colgate? Children love its taste. More important, test after test proved it really fights cavities. In one test, dental scientists compared Colgate's Gardol formula with the best-known fluoride. Their report, published in the Journal of the American Society of Dentistry for Children, confirmed Colgate unsurpassed in reducing new cavities.
How reassuring. We've always liked Colgate for breath problems.
There you are. But by the way, how's that toothbrushing problem?
What problem? You made us a one-toothpaste family with Colgate.
It tastes good.
Colgate, the largest selling anti-cavity toothpaste in the world.
Back here at Cape Kennedy, waiting for the launch of Gemini 9, the third attempt to get up this manned flight that is scheduled to rendezvous with an unmanned target vehicle that has been circling for 2 days since it was launched on Wednesday morning, and to give Eugene Cernan, 32-year-old Navy Lieutenant Commander, a 2.5-hour walk in space. The actual time to lift off is 9 minutes now, the countdown at 5, but there's a 4-minute hold built in. To that operation, to give the chance for a last-minute correction of any correction that is needed in the azimuth, the launch direction of this rocket, so that it will meet on the third orbit with its unmanned target up there in space. There has been a great deal of levity this morning about this flight, apparently, although Stafford and Cernan certainly looked serious as they went up the elevator. There was a sign waiting for them up there, signed by their backup crew, saying, "We were kidding before, but not anymore. Get yourselves into space or we'll take your place." Now let's go to Mission Control and Jack King. We were expecting an announcement from Jack King, the voice of...
This is Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 4 minutes and counting. T-minus 4, we will be going into a planned built-in hold at the 3-minute mark in the count. Duration of the hold, about 4.5 minutes. Aiming toward an ignition of the Gemini launch vehicle at 8:39 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've gone through a whole series of status checks over the last several minutes. This included Crewman 1 and Crewman 2 in the spacecraft. Tom Stafford, when he reported in, used a term that his command pilot, Wally Schirra, used on the Gemini 6 mission when it finally was launched. Stafford reported for the third time, "Go," when he gave his status report. Gene Cernan reported a little after that as he thanked the crew for their efforts and suggested that they all take a vacation, but then pointed out that they shouldn't start till about 2 seconds after ignition, which of course would be just prior to liftoff of the Gemini vehicle. Now coming up on the hold, T-minus 3 minutes and holding. T-minus 3 minutes and holding. The hold is expected to last for about 4.5 minutes. We will be resuming the countdown at 36 minutes and 30 seconds after the hour. This is Gemini Launch Control.
Reminding you again, this is an automatic hold, a planned hold to permit updating of the launch information before that target vehicle comes hurtling back across the Cape here, 185 miles high, in that perfect orbit that it was launched into by its Atlas booster on Wednesday morning. It was finishing its 29th revolution and beginning its 30th revolution as it passes the Cape here. It will be met on its 33rd revolution on the spacecraft's 30th revolution. Jack Siegel at the IBM Center in New York has a computer demonstration of launch windows. Let me say first, Jack, before you start on that we do have a launch window this morning of some 35 seconds or so for a third orbit rendezvous, and then on up through some 5 minutes or 6 minutes and 15 seconds we can launch in order to get a rendezvous by the 6th revolution, and if they don't get that, then they'll stand down and may try again at a second window which opens up at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time with the same kind of breakdown of 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th revolutions. So saying, Jack, and you look very pretty on camera there as I went through my spiel, you can explain just what these windows are about.
Thank you, Walter. Yes, this computer display should help us give an idea of what is involved in launch window. Here we have a circle representing the orbital path of the target vehicle, or the ATDA. Now we'll have the computer change that display so it's tilted. We pop on the Earth. Here is the North Pole. The South Pole is hidden, and the equator coming around in front. And we'll put on the United States, and then we'll shrink down a dotted line onto the surface of the Earth, showing the track of the target vehicle on the Earth, Walter. Then let's show the latitude, and here we get into one of the first of the key things in launch window. You'll see that the latitude of Cape Kennedy crosses that circle, the orbital path of the target vehicle, at these 2 points on this display. So if they could launch here or here, they'd be able to enter the same orbital plane with a minimum amount of fuel expended, or practically no amount of fuel expended, to get into the same plane. Here's a dot now representing the target vehicle. Let's start it in motion. And you'll see that as this target vehicle, the ATDA, is moving along in orbit, the Earth is also moving, rotating from left to right. So it's not only a matter of launching when you can get into the same plane, but also having that occur when you're not either too far ahead of or behind the moving target vehicle. Now, as you know, with the computer-driven display, we can stop the rotation of the Earth here, so let's do that, and we'll show a typical launch of a Gemini. Here we've stopped the picture, and you'll see with this launch there is an angle, and it's this angle, the wedge angle between the two, that they're trying to keep to an absolute minimum. One other factor is the point that they want to be able to rendezvous just before sunrise in the dark, to have that target vehicle up against the stars in the dark. So these are a few of the factors involved, Walter, in launch window.
Thank you, Jack. When this count is picked up here in a couple of minutes now, at T-minus 3 minutes, the first function will be to send computer update information to the spacecraft. That is updating the onboard computers of the spacecraft for its proper trajectory. It is important only if something should go wrong in the direction of the spacecraft, and this information is needed. Here's an announcement from Jack King.
T-minus 3 minutes and holding at this time. About 5 or 6 seconds from now, we will resume the countdown.
It was when they tried to do that update on Wednesday that there was a malfunction.
Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 3 minutes and counting. T-minus 3.
They've already fed information to the spacecraft, and they'll go even if it should malfunction again today, however. But they do believe they fixed it. It was in a little two small transistor modules, so-called, that less than an inch square, that were in the relay box of the computer
This is Gemini
chain.
Launch Control. Now T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. We have word here in the control center that the spacecraft computer has accepted the update information from the Mod 3 system. Of course, information has also gone by hardline to the Gemini launch vehicle. Now T-minus 2 minutes and 15 seconds and counting. The Air Force Eastern Test Range has given the blockhouse an OK to launch at this point. Coming up at T-minus 2 minutes and counting.
We are going to stay here with the voice of Jack King.
This is Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 1 minute and 40 seconds and counting. We have a report that there was a switchover in Houston, but now we have confirmation that the update data is in the computer. The computer has accepted this update data, T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds and counting.
Wrong, Dad.
T-minus 1 minute and 20 seconds and counting. All appears to be proceeding well at this point in the countdown during the final phases. The astronauts have been alerted, and we have gimbaled those engines as planned. The engines have swung, the first stage engines, and our checkout still continues at this point, coming up on 1 minute shortly. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. T-minus 60. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. We will get ignition at 0 in the countdown. Some 3 seconds thereafter, liftoff will come. During that period, there will be a period of about 1.8 seconds where we possibly will have the capability of shutting down if necessary. T-minus 35 seconds and counting. T-minus 30. T-minus 25 seconds and counting. We're on an automatic sequence. Everything appears to be going well during this final phase. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have ignition.
We have a liftoff. Looks like 39 minutes, 32 seconds after the hour.
We're right on time for rendezvous. This is exactly when they wanted it. Roll, pitch.
17 seconds. Flight Dynamics reports the thrust looks good. The roll program has started. The roll program is completed. The pitch program has started.
Roll and pitch to get into the proper azimuth. The sun catches the rocket beautifully, goes through a little layer of clouds. Magnificent launch. It looks like Gemini 9
confirmed at 3933 after the hour.
Gemini 9 looks like she's well on her way.
50 seconds into the flight. The spacecraft and its booster are moving at 740 miles per hour. We are now reaching for 4 nautical miles in altitude.
She's just about to go through maximum Q, that maximum buffeting that the spacecraft gets as it hits the atmospheric layer about 8 miles high. Gone through max Q just now.
Plus 1 minute and 20 seconds. The spacecraft is now approximately 8 nautical miles in altitude. The track looks good. We are about 5 nautical miles downrange.
Our next critical moment is the shutdown of the Stage 1 engines of the Titan and the ignition of the Stage 2, the 100,000-pound thrust Stage 2. Those big engines should be shutting down at 2:30.
45 seconds, and we are 12 nautical miles downrange and approximately 16 nautical miles in altitude. The track still looks very good.
Those two big engines of that first stage booster with some 430,000 pounds of thrust gulping almost unbelievable quantities of fuel.
T plus 2 minutes, 20 seconds. The flight crew have been notified that they are go for staging.
They're on their way, all right, and that first stage cutoff should come just now.
Spacecraft is now about 52 nautical miles, 50 nautical miles downrange, and about 36 nautical miles in altitude, and we have BICO.
You can see it there.
Cut off.
A magnificent picture.
The thrust looks good.
The track looks that long-range camera, you could see the flare. There's a flare as the booster engines.
T plus 2 minutes, 50 seconds.
First stage is cut off. Second stage has ignited properly. Everything going exactly right now. They've got 100,000 pounds of thrust for the next stage of their journey up into orbit.
The officer reports that the track looks real good to him.
This picture is from something called
Flight Dynamics and Guidance and Surgeon all report they look good. The spacecraft now is approximately 120 nautical miles downrange and approximately 60 nautical miles in altitude.
They should have jettisoned their second stage about now.
Flight Dynamics says we're right down the middle.
Perhaps I missed the announcement. They should have had a jettison of second stage at 3 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight. A tremendous picture of them there
still.
Is
now about 70 nautical miles in altitude and approximately coming up on 200 nautical miles downrange. The track looks good, excellent.
They also have a heat shield around the spacecraft, similar to that shroud that perhaps did not jettison on the target vehicle.
Kranz has just completed a final status check. We are green and go, and that information has been passed on to Tom Stafford in Gemini 9.
In just a minute from now, the second stage should be cutting off.
Gemini 9 is now 280 nautical miles downrange and approximately 80 nautical miles in altitude.
Those miles you see there on the screen are nautical miles. Statute miles, it's 80 miles high now, a little over 80, almost 90 miles high. And some 215 miles downrange.
5 minutes. Track looks excellent.
Another less than a half a minute now.
Is following our plot boards here perfectly.
And now about 20 seconds to second stage cutoff.
0.8. We have reached 80% of the velocity needed for orbit. Flight Dynamics says the trajectory looks very good to him.
This orbit that they hope to
5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Be injected into is 100 by 168 miles, elliptical orbit so-called. They should have had now second stage cutoff. Let's listen.
SECO, the second stage engine has cut off.
And now, in another 5 seconds, they jettison that second stage engine, and the spacecraft is on its own.
A go for IVAR, and that is being passed on to Tom Stafford by communicator Neil Armstrong.
They're now
for IVAR. Stafford will burn his thrusters to correct any small in-plane and velocity discrepancies.
We're showing you that second stage cutoff. We haven't had confirmation of it yet. But we haven't been getting a readout on every stage, and presumably second stage cutoff has taken place and second stage jettison. We did have cutoff, but not jettison. But at this time, some 6.5 minutes into the flight, the spacecraft is in orbit, if all has gone well, 100 by 168 mile orbit.
6 minutes and 40 seconds.
It's reached its orbital speed of 17,500 miles an hour, if all has gone well, and we assume it has. It looks good so far, but we have not had that second stage jettison announcement. If it is going well, it's now some 7...
The indication from our flight dynamics officer is that Tom Stafford is thrusting aboard Gemini 9.
Eugene. obviously things are going well. If he's thrusting to make minor corrections as would be planned to get into his precise orbit, and these are very minor changes at this point.
The thrust shows now has been turned off. The thrust is off. Flight dynamics says he's looking real good. We are 7 minutes, 37 seconds into the flight.
They should be trailing the target vehicle now by about 700.
More data here. Gemini 9 should be in orbit. We do not as yet have any orbital values. As soon as we get them here, we will pass them on to you. Meantime, now...
They should be about 700 miles behind the target vehicle now.
T plus 8 minutes and 15 seconds.
And they are about 85 miles below it. In the separation from that second stage of the Titan booster, Stafford gives a little 1 1/3 mile an hour forward thrust, and just to help pull away after the explosive bolts are blown.
Plus 8 minutes and 42 seconds. The spacecraft is now passing over the tracking range of the Bermuda station.
Something new on this flight too, they had windshield covers for the trip in the launch phase until they got into orbit, because it turned out when second stage firing took place on previous Gemini flights, the Titan, this ball of fire clouded up the windows and made observation, rendezvous, and docking procedure somewhat difficult. So they put plastic covers over the windshields, transparent covers that the astronauts were to jettison.
9 minutes and 25 seconds into the flight, we have a preliminary estimate on that orbit now. 86 nautical miles perigee by 150 nautical miles apogee. These figures will be refined as we pass over the tracking station at Canary Islands.
86 by 150.
We will now play back the taped voice communication between the flight crew and the ground controllers during the launch phase. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mission. Lift off. Roll program initiate on time. Roger, roll. Roll complete. Roll complete. Pitch program initiate. Roger on the pitch. Mark, 50 seconds. And the lift. Roger on the cabin.
Okay.
140 miles.
Thank you.
We didn't copy that, Tom. Still couldn't copy it, Tom. We got the Cernan, so keep us closely advised, Neil. Oh, okay, I got you now. You're in mode 2 now. Advise no DCS updates now. Negative DCS updates.
flare.
Roger, guidance.
That flare is the flare that comes at staging. Our replay just a little bit ahead of the replay of the tape of the astronauts talking. The voice you hear at the Cape at Launch Control is that of Bill Anders, one of the third-generation astronauts, who hasn't yet had an assignment for his flight into space. I don't know whether we're still hearing part of that tape or not. I suppose that tape transmission has been completed. It was a reasonably clear replay of the voice of the astronauts as they took off from the Cape here some 14 minutes ago. As you see now, they're approaching the coast of Africa. They're less than 700 miles behind and 85 miles below the target vehicle. The first orbit figures given us here indicate that they're very close to the expected orbit at 99 miles at their perigee and 172.5 miles at apogee. It was supposed to be 100 by 168. We usually get some correction of that orbit, though, as they track the vehicle past these various tracking stations, and we'll know more about that later. That little bit of discrepancy would not make any serious difference at all in the planned rendezvous on the third orbit. Everything looks good for the flight of Gemini 9, finally. CBS News color coverage of Gemini 9 will continue in a moment.
Crunch, quench, munch, quench, lunch, quench, bunch, quench. Meet the great American quencher, Lipton iced tea. It has more quench because it has more brisk flavor than other iced teas. Why? The Lipton blend and the flow-through tea bag. It's like getting 2 bags of flavor in one. Look inside. 2 bags of flavor in one. You get that clean, fresh, brisk Lipton flavor. So when you bunch, lunch, munch, crunch, quench with Lipton iced tea. It has more quench because it has more flavor than other iced teas and less than 2 calories per glass. More people drink it than all other teas combined. Lipton, flow-through tea bags or new instant, the only instant tea with brisk Lipton flavor.
Well, can we stay with it now? Back here at our CBS News Space Center at Cape Kennedy with this flight 16 minutes old and so far looking very good. There is a slight discrepancy apparently in the orbit and the flight path of the Gina vehicle, and Chris Kraft from Houston has been giving them some update information on small maneuvers which they will make to get themselves into the proper track for a third rendezvous with the third revolution rendezvous with this target vehicle. That will come at 2:05 this afternoon. The actual rendezvous will come about 1:33. Docking will come. We're trying to hear that.
Roger, say again, address 72. That's 25714.
We're hearing a transmission between the spacecraft and Neil Armstrong, who is the capsule communicator at Manned Space Center in Houston for this shift at the consoles at Houston. It was a beautiful liftoff from here, and at the moment the rendezvous should come at 1:33 Eastern Daylight Time, and then if they find that that cone, that shroud, is not on the target and has been jettisoned as planned, they will dock with the target at about 2:05 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, north of Hawaii.
Communication between Gemini 9 crew and the launch team at the Cape. And we have a note here from our surgeon, Dr. Owen Coons, on the heart rates of the pilots during the launch phase. Pre-launch, our command pilot, Stafford, heart rate was 90. At liftoff, 100. During the launch phase peak, It was 140. Pilot Cernan, pre-launch, heart rate was 95, liftoff 105, and during the peak launch phase 120. This is Gemini Control, 18 minutes, 16 seconds into the mission.
So the flight of Gemini 9, finally, after 2 disappointments, is on the way. Everything so far looks exceedingly good for a completion of this mission. The big question now, what will they see when they get near that target? Will they be able to dock with it as planned? At any rate, Cernan now can look forward to that spacewalk tomorrow morning. We'll have further bulletins as they are needed here on CBS News. Walter Cronkite at Cape Kennedy.
The Week in Space. CBS News selective color coverage of the mission of Gemini 9. Next, the rendezvous in space of Gemini 9 and its target. CBS News coverage resumes at 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. This is CBS.
Caplow, take 2, Mission Control Building. Men who actually work in that room right back here.
This is Gemini Control, 3 hours, 35 minutes into the mission. Gemini 9 and its target are passing over the Ascension Island tracking station area. The range between the spacecraft and the target is now between 25 and 30 miles. The terminal phase initiation, or forward burn, has been initiated. This is Gemini Control, 3 hours, 35 minutes, 30 seconds into the mission, and at this time we will play back the tape voice communication between the spacecraft communications here at Mission Control, remoting through Ascension to Gemini 9.
Gemini 9, Houston, standing by. Gemini 9, Houston, standing by. Okay, Tom, if it won't hurt you to go ahead and press start comp after you get your solution. We recommend it.
Gemini 9 elevation 19.4, range 31 miles. Rate 119. Now Gemini 9 will make it to halt range.
Houston, could not copy.
Houston, Gemini 9, the optical voice side is within a quarter degree of the radar burst site.
Roger, understand.
Gemini 9 will hit point 22 degrees, 32 miles.
Houston, you're a little bit garbled, Gene.
Gemini 9, I've got the solution to look at real good with point 3, but when I push that pump, the light turns on. If I reverse turn, pass the light, see if we get it. First loop is 26 forward, 3 right, make 8 up.
3, 1, go ahead.
Point B is elevation 25.2, range 27906, 5 range rate, backup solution gives 24 forward, 0 up down.
Houston, roger. Houston, LOS.
That was taped communication between the Houston Control Center, remoting through Ascension, and Gemini 9. At this time, Gemini 9 and the target are approaching the African continent, and the range at this time in the order of 20 miles. This is Gemini Control, 3 hours, 37 minutes into the flight. This is Gemini 9 and the target are now passing over the southern tip of Africa. Gemini 9 is on its third revolution. At this time, the range between Gemini 9 and its target is approximately 20 miles. This is Gemini Control, 3 hours, 41 minutes into the mission.
I'm with a couple of men who actually work in that room right back here on the lobby level of the Mission Control Building, and whose job is very much involved in the maneuvers made to reach where a spacecraft wants to go. Jim Stokes and Leroy Hall. Mr. Stokes, as I understand it, you people stand by there ready to give updated information quickly if it's necessary. If, for instance, a maneuver doesn't go precisely the way it had been planned. Is that right?
That's correct.
How long does it take you to correct a maneuver and shoot it back upstairs?
Normally this is about a half-minute operation for the computer.
From the time you receive it to the time you send it back?
From the time we receive the inputs until the time the information is displayed for the flight control personnel to use, to take action on.
Mr. Hall, then, as I understand it, you people are in a sense sort of a standby emergency team. Is that a fair way to put it?
I think so, yeah.
Have you ever had occasion where you had to relay information back to correct a thrust or something?
Not a real emergency, no.
Exactly when it comes into you, what do you do back there?
Well, basically, we know where the rendezvous is to occur, and we know the various constraints, such as the lighting constraints and that sort of thing. And knowing the trajectory of the target vehicle, having determined that from tracking data, and by determining the trajectory of the spacecraft, we then recompute the sequence of maneuvers which are required to arrive at the rendezvous point.
And all of this can be done in a half-minute's time?
This is done in approximately a half minute, yes.
Well, thank you very much. We have been talking to a couple of gentlemen who are very standby and ready to feed back new, fast, speedy, correct information on the amount of thrust that should be given in the event that a change is necessary. Herbert Kaplow in the Mission Control Building in Houston. Mr. Aldrin.
This is Gemini Control, 3 hours 44 minutes into the mission. According to our plotted data here, Gemini 9 should be within 17 miles range at this time of its target, and we will switch now to pick up the voice communication remoted through the Tenerife station with the Gemini 9 crew.
Arvin AFD. Go ahead, AFD. Turn off that beacon, that acquisition. Roger, will do. Roger.
This is Gemini Control. We are standing by here for voice communication with the Gemini 9 crew. This is Gemini Control. Gemini 9 and the target vehicle are passing over the Ascension Island tracking station at this moment. We are standing by to pick up any voice communication that may occur. Correction, the Tenerife tracking station located off the east coast of South Africa.
range rate, 89 feet per second.
Roger, we're less than a minute from LOS.
Banana Reeve has LOS.
That was live voice communication, remote through the Tananarive station and Gemini 9, and the last word, or probably just about the only word we heard from our crew, is that the range at that time was 9.35 miles. This is Gemini Control at 3 hours, 50 minutes, 51 minutes into the flight.